the Supernaturalist Podcast Show.
Well, I kind of wonder if there's a massive shift coming to the traditional way of doing missions. Sure. I just had coffee with a missionary recently, and they're struggling. They're in a Christ hostile nation where they really can't do communication. Yeah. And now they're back in the States and their itinerary. They're trying to raise funds, awareness, but it's just very, very difficult. Yeah. And I know a lot of other, when I was a part of a denomination in the area here, there was always this tension between the pastors and the missionaries, because the missionaries needed support and the pastors were already supporting. So just it's kind of felt like there needs to be some reform within the traditional way of supporting and funding, missionaries. And the conversation I was just having with this guy was kind of rethinking, getting a new perspective on their model, and kind of even maybe even breaking the stereotype of a missionary. Yeah. And getting kind of a fresh approach to their identity, so that they get some new options. Because I think that when you see yourself a certain way, then maybe you limit yourself on the options. Once you get a larger kind of perspective of your identity and whatnot, all of a sudden the Lord begins to say, you can do this, and so even just getting the perspective that I'm a minister, I can have a ministry that's bigger than the missionary identity.
Absolutely.
And so so I think it's interesting that you just the language that you were using, and also we also know that we're about to hit a major missions movement.
Absolutely.
And we're about to see a major Great Awakening hit not just America but the nations, and we'll see waves of missionaries just going all over the place, and we're going to need a new wineskin for how we've done missions.
Absolutely. I think that's one way. I think even how we've approached missions, I think there's business models. There's all kinds of different the ways and things. There's going to be places that are hostile towards Christians. You can't go in with a big ministry, but you could go in as a business person. You could go in as a consultant. You could go in, and like I was mentioning over coffee earlier. Like, we're seeing churches in Hong Kong planted in corporations.
Really?
Yeah.
Actual
businesses, like within the business, there's a church being planted.
That's amazing.
And so like there are so many different forms and models and ways of doing church, and ways of planting, and ways of doing missions, and ways of doing evangelism, and that are being birthed in this hour, that are out of the box, unorthodox. You don't have to be the traditional minister that goes through seminary or whatever. Like maybe you're a business person, and maybe your mission field is your company, and maybe you can start a church right in your company. I think these are the kinds of ways of thinking, new paradigms, new containers for the seasons.
That's incredible. That's incredible. Yeah. When I was in Indonesia, I met a pastor, and I think his church was maybe around 3,000 or something. Sure. But it was interesting because he was 85 at the time, and he just started pastoring in his late 70s because he was a dentist. Wow. And so once he retired from dentistry, he became a megachurch pastor. And so I asked him, well, how did God call you into the ministry? Yeah. And he said, God never did call me into the ministry. He called me into dentistry. I said, well, that's great. So how did you become a pastor? He goes, well, my pastor said that he needed a pastor to take over this church. And since my pastor asked me, I had to honor him. So I just said yes. And, he had his own practice, but he had all these years of experience as far as really how to carve, he had the discipline, and just some, but God just kind of anointed him, graced him for, so here he is in his 80s, pastoring, doing a phenomenal job, just so much passion, and the people loved him.
And I bet you everybody that he was a dentist of all those years followed him,
That's right. Doctor.